Hi folks, Dave, the Honest Audiophile. This is the Drop+Hifiman HE-R7DX, and these are my honest audiophile impressions. The Drop+Hifiman HE-R7DX is available on drop.com for $150. It has 50mm dynamic drivers. They use the Hifiman topology diaphragm. There's 16 ohms of impedance, 101 decibels of sensitivity. They have custom Focus A pads, a 1.5 meter or 60-inch cable, and they weigh 11.9 ounces or 338 grams. This is the cable that comes with it. It's all rubberized, nothing special. If you're familiar with Hifiman, it's their basic cable. And these are the R7DX. You have the old school Hifiman headband. You have plastic cups, plastic slider cap. You do have metal yokes, steel spring inside the headband. There's your Focus A pads, and they are rather large, slightly angled, and very strange that Drop and Hifiman chose to go with a very subtle and hard to read branding letters on the caps. And also there is a very small black R and L to indicate which side is which, because the angle is very, very subtle. Overall, I find that the headband, it works as far as comfort. It's not the greatest. It's never been my super favorite, but I don't mind this headband. It does have a problem with clamp force, and so you really do have to play around and adjust. So when I first got them and I put them on, I was like, whoa, these things are about to fall off my head. I really did have to adjust that headband and push it in to make it fit on my head. I also noticed it did help sonics some. It brought in a little bit more bass, and it tightened things up just a little bit on sound. So do make sure that you mess around with the headband if you own these and are struggling with fit and sound. When you put them on your head, first thing you're going to notice is these things don't do a good job of isolating outside noises. You pretty much can hear everything that you heard when you had them on. They block probably somewhere in about the 20 to 25% of outside noises. If you're going to use these in a louder environment, you might as well not even wear them, because they're not going to block out anything. They're pretty bad when it comes to isolation of outside noises. Comfort-wise, they're not bad. They're extremely light. I don't have any problem with it. At first, I did have a little bit of a hot spot up top, but it kind of broke in a little bit and I had no problems with it. I was able to get the clamp force to be better, but it's still not the greatest. So do mess around with the clamp force and bend it so that it'll fit on your head, and you will get slightly better improvement on sonics. When you put the cables on, another frustration is, because those letters are so hard to read. I mean, Hifiman and Drop, why did you not use white letters or a little bit more bolder lettering so that's easier to see? But anyways, when you put them on, the cables are not angled very far forward, and so they kind of mess around on your collar. They kind of can get stuck on the collar, or if you have shoulders that are a little higher up, it can really touch, and you can kind of hear the cable just a little bit, and so it kind of messes with it. Another thing that kind of is a nuisance is you can hear whenever you touch the headphone itself anywhere. If you're adjusting your glasses, you can really hear it. If you tap the top of the headband, you can really hear it. It's just kind of a nuisance and an annoyance. And then the other thing that I kind of noticed a little bit, and it's kind of subtle, but you can hear it, is when you put them on, you get this like seashell effect. It kind of has a little bit of like you're going into an echo chamber. All right, so I used the Hifiman HE-R7DX. Let's just call it the R7DX. I used the R7DX on all the gear that I have in house, and I tried it on everything. Dongles, DAPs, desktop, and I found that the R7DX is not picky. It played off of dongles just fine out of my OnePlus 9 Pro. It worked on my DAPs, the Sony NWA105, the Sony WM1A. It also worked on desktop out of the Mytek Liberty DAC, the Headamp GSX Mini, the Drop One Linear, Aueze Deckard, Hifi, Zencan, DAC V2 Signature, the Hifi Zen DAC or Can Signature MZ99. Worked just fine out of everything, including little low-powered stuff like a Lava Audio DS400 and things like that. So it's not picky whatsoever, and it's extremely efficient and very easy to drive. How does the R7DX sound? The Hifiman R7DX. It is got a bass that is very lightweight. It's rolled off into sub bass. You really don't get any sub bass presence whatsoever. Even with the adjustments of the headband, it really doesn't bring in a whole lot. It does add a little bit more impact, but it's still a very lightweight bass that is rolled off. Also, it kind of is, even though it's lightweight in note weight and in density, it is not very impactful. It's a very subtle, like a brush kind of a tap instead of a punch. It doesn't have a lot of slam, a lot of punch to it. It's just a very, I'm here, kind of timid bass. The weird thing is, it kind of gets bloated. And it kind of does one note bass. It's kind of odd. It's not very well defined. And it will kind of muddle things up on busier bass tracks. Going into the mids are unbalanced. They have a big divot in the lower mids region, and it just sounds hollow. It just sounds very thin, very lackluster. And remember when I said you get an echo chamber on your head when you don't have music playing? Yeah, you get that also when music is playing and it's in the mids. It's just very reverby and just does not sound natural, especially in the lower mids region. And then the main mids and upper mids are elevated and elevated too much, and it just becomes thin and tinny and sibilant. And there's just sharpness to it and just an annoyance in the mids. They're not very natural and accurate. They have a thin note weight just like the bass. And they just... to me, the mids they're okay, but they just don't have the naturalism I'm looking for, the note weight, the density, and the overall balance and cohesion that I'm looking for in the mids. And then when you get into the treble, there's one word that explains the treble: hot. The treble is way too elevated. It has way too much excitement and energy, and it's just over the top exuberant, and it is painful to me often. And I do not enjoy the treble whatsoever. It's not well controlled and it's not well refined and defined. Soundstage is fairly wide, especially for a closeback. Why? Mostly because when you have them on, it doesn't block anything. So you're pretty much almost a open back headphone. It also is a little too wide. It can sound a little too stretched, and it thins things out as it goes across. Imaging is okay. It's got a little bit of issues every now and then, but for the most part, it'll do a fairly decent job in imaging and following and tracking things across the stage. Depth is all right, and layering is okay. It does get muddled, does get confused, especially on busier tracks, but for the most part, for the price tag, it's not a bad headphone when it comes to soundstage and depth and layering. Tone and timbre. This thing is not natural. It is not accurate whatsoever. Way too thin a note weight and density. And the timbre is tinny. Also, it just lacks naturalism in accuracy. And it has too much reverb and too much elevation in the mids and in the treble. And it's just... oof. $150. Yeah, for $150, get this. The Rode NTH-100. The Rode NTH-100 is more accurate in tone and timbre, more accurate with bass, mids, and treble, has better note weight and density, and is natural sounding, and does a better job with an accurate soundstage and width, depth, and layering. Overall, the Rode NTH-100 is just better in all ways, and it costs the same as the Drop R7DX. The Drop R7DX reminds me of another headphone. Thankfully, it's not quite as bad as that one was, but it reminds me of a Monoprice Retro. Ugh. It's been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next video. Speaking of next video, somewhere on the screen, subscription links, notification bells, and all kinds of other good things. If you haven't already checked all those off, go ahead and do that right now. And then don't forget to give a thumbs up or a thumbs down to the video. Also, check out the links down below. There's all kinds of information regarding how you can contact the channel, how you can follow the channel, support the channel, all kinds of good things down below, like gear recommendations, music recommendations, and all kinds of other things. This has been Dave, the Honest Audiophile. Don't forget to enjoy the music, and honesty is the best policy.